Boom.
Back with another episode. What's happening, Don?
What's up, Jazz? How you doing?
Good, good. Hitting double digits, our 10th episode.
Yeah, man, it's exciting.
Yeah,
Keeping it flowing.
exactly. So there hasn't been too many updates or any UFC news, nothing on the fights happening. It's all gone very quiet since 249 was called off.
Yeah, man, sort of the reality of the lockdown setting in. Everything's on hold. Unless you the WWE, which somehow in the state where they operate have been granted essential service status. So
wow, I wonder how they kind of wrap their head around that one.
the mind boggles.
Yeah, and also I guess I don't know who technically owns WWE, whether it's Vince McMahon outright or he has partners like Dana, but maybe if he doesn't have partners, that's the reason he can pull it off. Because if it wasn't for Dana's partners, Disney, it would have happened.
Yeah, I mean, we can look into that. I think they're publicly traded now. Vince, I think, still has the majority. But interesting things going on there. How they got that essential service status sounds a little bit dodge.
A little fishy. That's a little bit, or a couple of paybacks there, kickbacks.
Yeah.
All right, Don. So we thought we would maybe look at seeing, in our opinions, who are some of the best UFC fighters, current or past, to have not been able to win a UFC title.
Yeah.
You want to get us started?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I got a couple. Sort of the first guy I'm going to say, just because it's kind of fresh in the minds of UFC fans, and he's such a good guy. Is Joseph Benavidez.
Right.
You know, I thought he'd win the title. With sort of Henry Cejudo moving away, Dominic Cruz on the shelf.
Right.
Dominic Cruz, sort of a bit heavier, but DJ at one championship.
Right.
And the fight just didn't go his way. He might be a little bit past his prime as well, but he's a guy who's really, really unfortunate that his prime coincided with Demetrius Johnson, you know?
Right.
And it's one of those things where, you know, pound for pound, he's an exceptional fighter.
Right.
But he's a guy who just, it's like being a great New Zealand fly half while Dan Carter was around. It's just one of those things where...
And for me, that's your analogy. And for me, the analogy would be, because I played quite a lot of golf growing up, would be Tiger Woods. You know, everyone in the prime of Tiger Woods' career, all those guys, I don't know, Phil Mickelson, how many seconds he had to Tiger Woods in major championships, you know?
Exactly.
So I was looking at Benavidez' last fight for the vacant flyweight championship. I'm assuming that's when... Was that when Demetrius left?
No, that was when Cejudo moved. Cejudo basically...
Oh, he moved up.
In time.
Yeah, and he fought Figueiredo.
Yeah.
I remember that fight.
Yeah, and he was doing all right, and then he got caught, you know?
He did get caught, things. Right.
But I mean, if you look at his record, this is 2020. It's very arguable that his prime was sort of 2011 to 2013.
Definitely.
You know, and
look, he's got very few back-to-back losses. He has a loss, and then he like bounces back with like 2 to 4 wins in a row, and then 5 wins in a row. So yeah,
exactly. You look at his professional career from 2006 when he made his debut till 2013. Actually, from 2006 until 2018, the only people he lost to were Dominic Cruz and Demetrius Johnson. That's a 12-year run.
Yeah, no, it's a great pick, Don. I did think about him, but I didn't think he was actually, I didn't have a look at the statistics and see that his only losses were to like the 2 of the greatest.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Anyway, hard luck for that guy. I'm a huge fan. Great, really nice guy. He and Megan O'Leary are one of my top 2 or 3 celebrity couples. So
nice.
But it's been a good career, you know?
Yeah, she's a great reporter and, I don't know, interviewer, I guess, too.
For sure. So who got that?
So it was a tough one. I was going back and thinking about it. Obviously, I also have a couple, but I was thinking it's funny that you mentioned Benavidez because they come out of the same camp. It's hard not to think of Uriah Faber.
Yeah.
He had 4 title fights. Always top of the pile. He came out of the WEC, I think, as the champ. Just always fighting top tier guys, always in there or about in the title picture. And I think that he had 4 title bouts. I'm trying to see if I pulled up who his records were or whose fights were against.
Yeah, another guy who I think Dominic Cruz sort of was the bane of his existence, you know?
Yeah, Dominic Cruz, Henan Barao. He had 2 losses to Henan Barao, which were both for title shots, and then Dominic Cruz at UFC 132. And I can't see that one right now. But yeah, just definitely a guy I would have loved to have seen capture a title. He's just got such a history in the sport, such a great fighter, great guy, big name, you know.
Yeah, and he ran into Jose Aldo as well. Remember that fight where Jose Aldo tore his legs to shreds?
I remember that clearly, yeah. That was brutal.
Brutal. But I think Faber, you know, on the one hand, you can kind of think of Faber as a champion because the weight division didn't exist in the UFC when he was the WEC champion.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of title shots, a lot of opportunities that didn't go his way. And it's interesting, Uriah Faber at the moment, I heard him on the Michael Bisping podcast, sort of unclear whether he's retired or not. Because remember, he came out of retirement and he won his first fight back and then he lost. He was sort of like keen to make a title run. And he's not really willing to say on the podcast whether he's retired or not at this stage. One of the interesting things he said was that it's been so long since Dominic Cruz has fought because of injury that Uriah Faber retired and unretired in the space of time that Dominic Cruz has been on the shelf.
Yeah. But maybe that's a good comeback fight for the both of them then. A little bit of history, both long layoffs. Well, not
it is a great comeback fight for both of them. But everyone's sort of talking about Cruz Cejudo, and I'm sure if that fight's available, Cruz is going to take it.
Agreed. Yeah, I wouldn't say that the Uriah and Dominic fight would be like it would more be kind of like a story fight, you know, the history, the blood. But if you want to look at like, you know, top guys at their game right now, even though we haven't seen Dominic in a while, the Cejudo fight does make a lot of sense.
For sure.
All right, Don, and who would be kind of your second pick?
Okay, I got a few. I don't think we'll get through all of them, but I'm definitely going to put Yoel Romero there.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the guy, he's had a lot of title shots. He's a great fighter. He really kind of, we've spoken about this on a previous episode, but wrecked his last shot. He was obviously worried about Israel Adesanya's feints, so he just didn't buy anything. He was worried about Israel Adesanya's counter-striking, so he didn't throw first. And he forgot that Israel Adesanya has a longer reach than him and is a really smart fighter. So Adesanya just stayed away from him and picked him off and won on points. So he kind of wrecked that one. But if you look at the fights against Robert Whittaker, he came really, really close. And there's a strong argument that he won at least the second fight. You know, the first fight I think he might have been. The second fight, he was overweight, okay? So he wasn't eligible to win the title anyway. But he's in there with the champion, and there's he was dominating the end of the fight. Really came close to knocking him out. A couple of people would have said some 10-8s could have swung the fight. Other people would have said, you know, the rules or the judging criteria should be skewed towards the end of the fight. That's a bigger debate. But the guy is an incredible fighter, and I think a bit unlucky not to have won a title during his career. And I think the chance is probably gone now.
Yeah, especially after that last performance.
Yeah.
But somehow he always makes his way back into the picture, and he's a fighter for the most part, barring that last fight everyone loves to see.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, no, that's a good call. And then I would say my other one would be Alexander Gustafsson. I think his first fight with John Jones was an epic fight. I think a lot of people thought it was the greatest light heavyweight fight they'd ever seen. Razor close fight. And then he fought Cormier when John Jones was out of the picture. And that was also a decision, but I think that people felt also very close. And then obviously fought Jones for the second time, being his third shot at the title, and he got finished in that fight. But again, two very close fights to getting his hands on the title. Some could argue, like Jones has and stuff, that in Jones's first fight with him, you know, he was still partying and on the drugs and didn't train. But, you know, it's hard to tell. You got to look at the fight, and
Yeah.
it's an epic one. So
it's also hard to believe that, given what we know now, that Jones has ever really been that much on the straight and narrow.
Right.
But obviously there's degrees to that.
Definitely, and how good he can be when he's not fully focused.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, I'll throw in just to say, like, this is a bit of an out there call, but
Right.
Claudia Gadelha was a killer who was undefeated and ran into Joanna Jędrzejczyk in her prime and lost, I think, twice.
Okay.
And I think there've been a lot of dominant women champions. Ronda, Joanna, Cyborg, Amanda Nunes, now Shevchenko. And there's often like this big gap between them and the next person. But Gadelha was like right there, and she was such a good fighter, such good grappling. And I kind of feel like those, sometimes like a loss or two, running into your nemesis and just not being able to get through them can kind of psychologically knock you back. And I think that happened to her. I think a similar thing might have happened to Wonderboy Thompson, who was on a serious tear until Tyron Woodley, and he had two really close fights with a prime Tyron Woodley for the title, and was very unlucky. Yeah, he lost both, and the one was really close, maybe the one not as close.
Yeah.
But Tyron Woodley, such a good fighter, but also such a smart fighter, where he's not going to get sucked into your game, even if it seems a bit more boring.
Yeah, we saw that with Damian Maia too, how you fought him on the outside. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, Danya, I like those picks. Very interesting. And there's obviously a few more. We can maybe get into that on another podcast. And I was chatting to another friend of mine from my Jits Academy, and we were just saying, like, when do you think, you know, obviously the whole world's going to go back to normal? We all, you know, a lot of us play group sports, but for us, our kind of thing is Jits, where you got a lot of guys in very close quarters. I mean, you know, when do you think people are going to go back to their academies, training, feel comfortable training? You know, originally our academy said when it started happening, we're going to reassess in a week. This was before the lockdown. No one would have ever thought, you know, even once the lockdown is done, you know, large gatherings might be kind of barred for at least 6 months, a year, 18 months, who knows?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, man. I was reading that article by Stephen Kesting, who's you know, one of the better known sort of online black belts.
Yeah, great instructor.
Yeah, and he was saying, like, yeah, I think he wrote it a while before things became so intense in the States, and he was saying he's pulling his kids out of school, he's closing his academy. You know, he's a guy who follows the science quite closely, and he was saying, look, it's going to be a long time, like probably best case scenario end of summer in the States, and very possibly like next year. And it's like a devastating thing to think about. And then the other aspect of it is, what will training look like? So are you going to have like a recent COVID test in order to be allowed in the gym? Are you going to have recovered from COVID in order to be allowed in the gym? Is it going to be like only post-vaccination becoming available? And then, you know, at a place like where you train in Cape Town, Jazz, at Henzo's, like, I don't know, you got like more than 100 guys on the mat on a good night. Is that ever going to be possible again? Are you know, it might be that people have got to come into the gym 10 at a time, and classes become, you can only train once a week, or I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, like, we're trying to answer the question is, you could put for any situation, you know, like, what's the economy going to look like? We really just, right now, we're all kind of not blindly guessing, but we're using the little data that we have to try and figure out how, you know, life is going to move forward. But yeah, it's very interesting. I think eventually it can go back to normal. I just think it's a matter of how long, you know, over this next 18 months, what's that going to look like? You know, as you say, are there only going to be 10 guys at a time? Yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, maybe you can find a handful of guys that you can train with, that you only train with those guys, and you guys maybe kind of keep track. But yeah, it's hard to think of, just going back after the lockdown. Some people might do that, but obviously I think well after the lockdown, keeping social distancing and large gatherings as a top priority is an important thing. So
100%, man. And it's going to be like, I don't know, man. It's just, jits is just one of those things where your hands are on each other's hands and faces and necks. And
yeah, it's not like maybe going back to the tennis club where you stand, whatever it is, a whole court, distance in between each other, or
100%, or yoga,
Yeah. I mean, jits is as close as it gets.
Yeah.
It's kind of shitty to think about. I kind of feel sad and I'm like, fuck, because I just thought, get through the lockdown, back to jits, but we didn't know as much about kind of the virus then. So, we didn't know how to make these judgment calls. Now it's pretty clear that, this is going nowhere after lockdown. It's definitely going to be around. So
yeah.
And also how to fix like the gym as a business, like any other business. And I guess,
I mean, it's definitely some gyms are not going to make it. I think that's, or going to have to change the way they operate. And it's been amazing to see gyms doing online sessions and things, but that's easier in an MMA gym where you can do boxing and kickboxing and shadow boxing and fitness but very, very few people are shacked up with the person that they can train with.
Yes. That was our mistake, Don. We should have shacked up pre-lockdown.
We're shacked up, yeah, man. Like we said, Khabib and Tony should have shacked up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Should have had a heavy training routine, morning drills, lunchtime open mat, and then evening class.
Yeah.
Anyway, man.
Next global crisis, we'll do it.
Yeah, well, they say this is not going to be the last pandemic, so next time we'll be more aware. We should slowly, over the months or years, buy mats and stuff, so by the time we get there, we prepared.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Don, good chatting. We'll keep an eye on the news. Otherwise, we'll just keep chatting related topics and keep the podcast rolling.
Sweet jazz.
All right, Don, take care.
You too.
Ciao.